Tonight on Bridge City News, we now have some of the names of Canadians who were killed in the tragic Ethiopian airline crash. Woods Homes has launched an initiative bringing to light the issue of homelessness in our city. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau still refuses to apologize to former ministers Jody Wilson-Raybould or Jane Philpott. We have the details. Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. We're now receiving more details of the tragic airplane crash in Ethiopia, which claimed the lives of 157 people, including 18 Canadians. Among the dead are Calgarian Derek Luji, Amina Ottawa and her 5-year-old daughter Sophia from Edmonton, a professor from Ottawa's Carleton University, 24-year-old Daniel Moore, who was originally from Toronto, and Peter Demarche from New Brunswick. At least 35 nationalities were among the dead. Ethiopian Airlines say investigators found the flight data and cockpit voice recorders. The flight to Nairobi crashed just 6 minutes after takeoff. Aviation authorities in Ethiopia, China, and Indonesia have ground their Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes a day after the tragedy in Ethiopia.
Because of the parallels and the proximity with the Indonesian accident, you would expect that the investigation will look very quickly at the systems that were in play in the Indonesian accident. They'll be looking to see what happened with the aircraft controls. The data recorders will give all sorts of information on height, speed, heading. It's a quite different airplane from the original 737, the classic. And the engines are bigger, they're more moved forwards, and they've had to be moved up because they're deeper to get them into the same space to allow the aircraft to operate in the same way. I'm told by those who've flown it, it's very nice to fly. The airlines love it. It's 14 to 15% more efficient on fuel, which is massive. And but there is this question now about systems within the aircraft. It has to be borne in mind, though, that Boeing, in building this, have followed exactly the procedures that they were required to do by the Federal Aviation Administration. So they have certified, designed, approved that. They've demonstrated that it complies with the various standards that are out there.
Air Canada has 24 of the Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft, and WestJet has 13. Neither of the Canadian airlines say they'd be willing to ground the jets, since in Canada they have a solid safety record. Boeing has delivered more than 350 of these airplanes to airlines around the world. Police and EMS were called out to a collision earlier today involving downed power poles in the area of 3rd Avenue and 8th Street South in Lethbridge. The city says they did not receive an influx of calls in regards to power outages in the area. If you have any inquiries about active service requests, you can get more information through the City of Lethbridge's new 311 service. David and Colette Stephan have returned to the courthouse for case management hearings and preparation for the retrial in June. The couple were charged and convicted for failing to provide the necessaries of life for their 19-month-old son, Ezekiel. During the original trial, they received worldwide criticism for their anti-vaccine views, and many media outlets suggested that had Ezekiel been vaccinated, he would have survived. Video journalist Naveen Day says vaccination was not a part of the original trial.
The recent measles outbreak has brought the topic of vaccinations to the forefront, especially on social media. And when David and Colette Stephan were on trial surrounding the death of their son Ezekiel, they got caught in the crossfire. Media outlets and social media painted a picture that vilified the couple for not vaccinating their son. Through exclusive interviews with David and Colette and rare access to court documents, Bridge City News has learned that vaccination had nothing to do with the original trial.
The Crown was trying to use our court case as a precedent-setting case wherein parents could be held criminally liable if they didn't vaccinate their children. And even though they didn't follow through with it in court, once they saw our lineup of expert witnesses that we had on board to fight off the vaccine issue, so they completely shied away from it, and we didn't have to bring in those expert witnesses. They ran away from it really quickly as soon as they saw that we actually had a defense, and part of me says or wished that it would have gone through, because the evidence that we would have brought forward into the courts would have actually worked opposite in their favor.
Can parents be held criminally liable for not vaccinating their children? What is failing to provide the necessaries of life? And what are those necessaries? Criminal defense lawyer Ari Goldkind explains.
What's really important here in the section, it's about a general societal standard, and that standard was created to help protect against the very people in our society that are most vulnerable, particularly when parents who may have issues with vaccination or issues with doctors or Jehovah's Witnesses for blood transfusions. The section is specifically not to cater to those whims, but to deal with the most vulnerable in our society and to impose a societal, not a parental standard.
A new trial will take place over 4 weeks in June. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
The online world can be a very scary world, especially when there's so many predators trying to lure our kids. Charlene Doak-Gebauer is the founder of Internet Safety First, and she says we really need to do a better job of supervising our kids when they're online.
We need to catch up to the digital age, and this is why I've created my theory of digital supervision, because we need to do something to save this generation. They're being exposed to far more than any generation in the history of the world.
Catch the full interview with Ms. Doak-Gebauer discussing how to protect your kids in the online world. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Many people agree that an increase in homelessness in Lethbridge over the past couple of years is a crisis. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how University of Lethbridge students plan to take charge, bringing light to this problem in dramatic fashion.
5 Days for Homelessness is a national campaign where students sleep outside in often horrible conditions to raise money for the cause. U of L students will tough it out this week.
If you don't do it, then someone might do it, but you never know. And so I think it's just better to just, put yourself out there and just do it.
It's a lot. Like, I really respect every single person, even the people that are just doing it for one day, because these wins are not easy.
They're not weathered like a lot of the homeless people that that we see in the downtown core of Lethbridge. But I think for these kids, it gives them the opportunity just to see what it's like to live on the other. I guess to have the other shoe on the other foot.
The goal is $4,000, and the students pledge to give all of the proceeds to Woods Homes, a nonprofit that houses homeless youth. Everyone involved in the fundraiser is compelled to help for different reasons.
Woods Homes is local. They're from Lethbridge. They contribute back to the community that we live in. They're not some entity from half a world away that we don't know where the money's going. We can see exactly what this company is doing to help the homeless here in Lethbridge.
I was born and raised in India, and I've experienced homelessness around me everywhere. Even like you look out your window and you can see there's like children who are just like walking around barefoot. They don't have homes, no shelters, nothing to go to. So seeing that made me realize that this is something I want to do what I can to help out.
It just says a lot to their character about who they are, what they stand for, and I just appreciate what they do and trying to basically help what we do at Woods Homes day in and day out.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Do you know someone who struggles with getting around the city due to a mobility or accessibility issue? The City of Lethbridge has developed a mobility accessibility master plan that will provide direction in making the city physically accessible for everyone.
So that is a master plan document. It is a strategic document that the city is implementing just to improve accessibility and mobility for all residents throughout our city. It started off as an initiative, just trying to help people with mobility issues in wheelchairs, with strollers, with walkers. We've really expanded to folks with vision loss and just looking at all aspects of mobility. One of the key takeaways from us since we started this plan was looking at the whole city from a very broad perspective, in that we're all temporarily able-bodied. We're all tabs, we call each other. We may not be living with an impairment right now, but at some point we all be affected by this one way or another, whether it's through a broken ankle or a more permanent disability. So it's really important that we as a city understand what our residents are going through and what we will all go through at some point.
For residents that have not yet been affected by mobility or accessibility issues, there will be wheelchair and vision loss simulation exercises at City Hall tomorrow between 3 and 7. For more information, visit getinvolvedlethbridge.ca or call 311. So why are we happier when the sun is out? A little shot of vitamin D, perhaps? The hormone melatonin is believed to play a major role. BCN's Loris Alexander explains why we walk on sunshine when there's a blue sky.
The glare of the sun, the melting snow. Oh yes, spring is in the air. Along with the sunny weather comes brighter moods.
So definitely see a lot more people going out when there's sunshine, but that'll also get you the vitamin D that you need to also help boost your mood, give you a nice happy feeling out in the sun.
There actually is scientific evidence that sunshine makes you feel better.
Some people think of decreased sun. Probably the most common thing that comes to mind first of all is seasonal affective disorder. Everyone's heard of that, I'm sure, which is commonly associated with a dip in serotonin levels, just a change in melatonin kind of levels. And so with that, of course, we see a change in mood. Serotonin is one of those chemicals that we associate with feeling good and feeling happy, feeling stable. Some people maybe doubt the idea that the sun can have an effect on your overall well-being and health and mental health, but there's lots of data out there, lots of information out there about it being having a real effect on your health.
Alicia says the sun encourages more outdoor activity, promoting mental health, and it also helps the body produce serotonin.
So the idea of the sun having an effect on our mood is undoubted. It's undoubted. There's no, for me, there's no measure between, dark and quiet and cold. I watch my animals, even when it's dark and quiet and cold, they hide out in the shelters and they hang out there, they sleep more, they're more withdrawn, they're not playful. Where this weekend, for example, it was beautiful outside, the sun was out, they were playing, they were suntanning, as were we outside playing. And so mood changes in my animals that I have in my acreage, as well as my kids, my clients, myself. For me, it's a undisputed factor.
Doctors may not be prescribing sunlight therapy yet, but if you find yourself in the doldrums at your desk, look for some light, as long as it comes from the sun and not the ceiling. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Tournament week for the 2019 Cavendish Farms U Sports University Cup Men's National Hockey Championship is finally here. The tournament bracket has been finalized, and the University of Alberta Golden Bears were selected as the top seed. They'll battle the U of L Pronghorns this Thursday. Pronghorns Athletic Executive Director Ken McInnes says this week is a great opportunity for everyone to come together to show their community spirit.
You're going to see a very high level of hockey. I think a lot of people that came to the January 10th game when we played the Golden Bear, in that case it was the Calgary Dinos, they saw great hockey. We also try and create a fun atmosphere around it. So we've got a DJ here, we have various games and stuff. We have a lot of different events planned, but they're just going to see some really good hockey.
Certainly speaks to the reputation and respect of the city and the university. It's one of the valuable things that our university brings to our city in terms of our reputation, its ability to host national events and bring the attention of the country to the city of Lethbridge.
The excitement kicks off with the Light It Up in Lethbridge tailgate party outside of the NMAC Centre Thursday at 5 o'clock. For Kevin Cooey, winning the Brier a year after missing the medals at the Winter Olympics felt sweet. Cooey's foursome beat Brendan Botcher's wildcard team 4-3 in the All-Alberta Final at this year's event in Brandon, Manitoba.
It's awesome, especially, a nail-biter like that. Happy for a few reasons. Obviously, two big ones being winning a Brier for Colton and BJ. You never know when you get to do that, and they'll be Brier champs forever. And then, getting the chance to represent Canada in Canada is something I've never been able to do, so can't wait just down the road from Calgary. To win like that only gives our team confidence going forward if we're in close games and big situations. We played a great game, but Brendan he never goes away. We had him in trouble in 9, and there's just so many shots he had to be perfect, and he was not really a big surprise, but he's just a hell of a curler, and we're fortunate to end up on top.
Congratulations again to the Cooey foursome. The Medicine Hat Regional Hospital is in need of volunteers. The extra help is required to support patients and their families. The Volunteer Resources Department has options available for those who like to visit, do leisure activities, or volunteer in a leadership role. To learn more about placements, visit Alberta Health Services website or call them at 403-529-8847. A second earthquake rocked central Alberta in less than a week. This one was centered about 32 kilometers northwest of Rocky Mountain House on Sunday. It registered 4.4 on the Richter scale. The Alberta Energy Regulator says the 4.6 magnitude quake, which was felt in Red Deer and Sylvan Lake, was attributed to fracking. No word yet on what caused the latest quake. Fortunately, there were no injuries or damage. The UCP says if it forms the next government this spring, it will create a scholarship for people leaving the Canadian Armed Forces. It will also create a fund to help families of fallen first responders. The party says the $5,000 scholarships would help former soldiers integrate back into the labor force. The funds will also be available to spouses and children of fallen or disabled members. A Heroes Fund, meanwhile, would provide a one-time payment of $100,000 to the families of first responders who have died while on duty. The spotlight in the SNC-Lavalin affair was shifted to Rookie Justice Minister David Lametti now that a court rejected the company's bid to force the public prosecutor to pursue an alternative to criminal proceedings. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau still refuses to apologize to both Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott over the controversy.
As I've said from the very beginning, we had conversations about a difficult situation in a way that Canadians would expect us to. Both Ms. Wilson-Raybould and Dr. Philpott have indicated that they intend to continue to remain members of the Liberal Party, and certainly they have indicated that they still share the values and objectives of this government when it comes to economic growth, when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to the environment, and a broad range of things. But obviously there are going to be reflections and discussions, but I will remind people that we are a party that values diversity of opinions and perspectives.
U.S. President Donald Trump is reviving his border wall fight. His new budget, which was delivered to Capitol Hill today, will seek $8.6 billion for this border project. He will also impose spending cuts to domestic programs and set the stage for another fiscal battle. Trump's 2020 proposal shows he's eager to confront Congress again to boost defense spending and cut $2.7 trillion in non-defense spending. The budget is titled, "A Budget for a Better America, Promises Kept, Taxpayers First." We had strong Chinook winds again today and milder temperatures. Will the spring-like conditions stick around? I'll have complete weather details coming up. Lots of wind and some blowing snow today. Tonight, mainly cloudy with a low near +1. Tomorrow, rain mixed with snow and a high near 2. Wednesday, a slight chance of flurries developing and a high near 1. Mainly sunny and 3 degrees for Thursday. Friday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near +2. Warming up just in time for the weekend. Sunshine and 7 for Saturday. Even warmer, 12 degrees expected on Sunday. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 5 and an average low of -7. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 2005 at 21 degrees, and the record low was -36 in 1951. Sunrise was at 7:54, sunset at 7:28. Looking at the national forecast for tomorrow now, Vancouver had a snowfall warning today. Tomorrow, rain mixed with snow and a high near 7. Rain and 10 is expected in Victoria. Snow and 0 for Calgary on Tuesday. Mainly sunny and 4 degrees for Edmonton. Regina will be mainly sunny as well and should get up to +2. Overcast and 2 degrees as well for Saskatoon. Sunshine and 0 for Winnipeg tomorrow. Toronto will be mainly sunny and 3. A few clouds and +1 for Ottawa. Montreal will also have a few clouds and -2. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be cloudy and 0. A slight chance of flurries in Halifax and a high of 2. Chance of flurries a -1 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, they had a wind warning today. Tomorrow, rain and a high near 4 degrees is expected. Air Canada and WestJet say they will not be grounding any of their Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircrafts. The MAX 8 was the plane involved in yesterday's fatal crash in Ethiopia, which left 157 people dead, including 18 Canadians. Air Canada says its 24 MAX 8 planes have performed very well. They've met all of the safety and reliability standards. WestJet says it is working with Boeing to ensure the safety of its fleet of 13 MAX planes. Many other airlines around the world, including Ethiopia and China, have grounded their MAX 8 jets indefinitely. Concerns have been raised over parallels to the crash of the Lion Air jet that plunged into the Java Sea last October, killing 189 people. Federal Tories are calling for an emergency meeting of the Commons Agricultural Committee to address what they call the government's lack of action on an important trade file. Chinese authorities have tightened restrictions on Canadian canola, citing pest issues with the product. The Chinese government also revoked the export permits of one of Canada's largest producers. Conservative members are calling on their Liberal counterparts to study the issue. They say they want to hear from federal ministers of agriculture, international trade diversification, and foreign affairs. Canada's new agriculture minister is heading out on tour. Marie-Claude Bebeau will meet with farmers and industry leaders. She began her tour in Vernon, BC today. She'll also make stops in Kelowna, Calgary, and Winnipeg. Bebeau will also participate in local agricultural events to highlight federal agricultural investment and programs. Canada's largest IT services provider is buying Swedish technology consulting company Acando. The deal is worth $614.7 million. Montreal-based CGI says the deal includes assumption of debt and represents a 44.2% premium to Acando's share closing price on Friday. CGI says Acanda will add more than 2,100 professionals from 5 countries across the world, including Germany, Sweden, and Norway. Tesla is walking back its plan to close most of its showrooms around the world. The company said today that it is still shifting to online sales, but will not close as many stores as originally planned. Tesla announced last month that it would close most of its stores to cut costs so it could make money on the $35,000 Model 3 electric car. Nissan's former chairman, Carlos Ghosn, who was recently released on bail, is asking for a court approval to attend the Japanese automaker's board meeting tomorrow. Nissan dismissed Ghosn as chairman after his November 19th arrest, but he remains on the board. It is not clear if he can attend based on restrictions imposed as a condition for his release on bail. Ghosn has been charged with falsifying financial reports and breach of trust, which he denies. Now here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, we now have the names of some of the Canadians who were killed in the Ethiopian's airline crash, which claimed 157 lives. Among the dead are 3 Albertans: Calgary accountant Derek Luigi, Amina Ottawa, and her 5-year-old daughter, Sophia, both from Edmonton. At least 35 nationalities were among the dead. An investigation as to what caused the crash continues. There's an organization out which can help protect your kids from porn and predators. It is called Internet Sense First. Up next, I chat with the group's founder. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The City of Lethbridge is hosting an open house Tuesday, March 12th from 3 to 7 p.m. in the City Hall foyer. It's an opportunity for residents to learn and engage in the development of our city. There will be information booths, a wheelchair and vision loss simulation, plus interesting activities for the kids as well. For more information, visit getinvolvedlethbridge.ca. The Helen Schuler Nature Center invites everyone to celebrate the change of seasons at their Spring Nature Fest on Friday, March 15th from 1 to 5 p.m. This event offers opportunities to enjoy the sights and sounds of the Lethbridge River Valley, plus indoor and outdoor activities, including geocaching, crafts, live music, and so much more. Easy Does It is an Al-Anon support group for adult children of alcoholics. Get an opportunity to share about your experiences with those who understand and learn healthy coping skills for your relationships. This group meets Thursdays at 7 p.m. at the Church of the Good Shepherd. For details, call Judy at 403-329-0661. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Today's children are constantly using digital devices, gaming systems, computers, and cell phones. Unfortunately, this puts many of our kids at risk to online predators. How much responsibility for their safety should we be carrying as parents and adults? Joining us now to talk about this today is Charlene Doke-Bauer, founder of Internet Sense First. Joining me from London, Ontario. Also joining me at the desk is Catherine Furukawa, a concerned mom of 2. Welcome both of you to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for having me.
Charlene, first of all, share a little bit about your organization and how you got started.
Well, it's an organization. We raise funds to support victims of child pornography. We pay for therapy for them. And those numbers are growing exponentially with the internet. And we do educational sessions. I have been traveling globally to teach people about my theory of digital supervision. And that's what the charity is about. I got started because a family member was a victim at the age of 4 by neighbors. And it was a horrible experience for the family. We were all devastated by it. And she went through her life very confused, upset, and at the age of 22 was killed by a drunk driver. And then as a network and computer specialist, I have found child pornography on a computer. And when I discovered it, I realized just how disgusting it is. And I started the charity hoping to do something for my family and turn a negative into a positive. And it's getting there. My family is very excited whenever I have accomplishments and so on, and it gives them more to think about than losing our family member the way we did.
Wow, Charlene, age of 4, a victim at the age of 4. Catherine, you have 2 daughters, age 5 and 3. How do you respond to something like that when you hear somebody the age of 4, tender age of 4?
It's really terrifying to think that this could be part of a reality with young children. Especially in a little city of Lethbridge, I realize it can happen anywhere, and
it is scary, isn't it?
It is, incredibly.
Charlene, how many parents actually monitor their kids' online activities? Do we really have an idea?
No, we don't. Very few, actually. They don't know what's going on. They refuse to believe it. And I don't blame parents, because parents try very hard. I don't want to point my finger and say they're not doing a good job. But what I am saying is that we need to catch up to the digital age. And what I tell a lot of people is that I was teaching 15 years ago, and we were excited on the network. I managed the network, the file server, and everything, excited when we had an animated GIF on the screen. And in the year 2019, we have live streaming of videos, which is unfortunately the way these predators like to operate. It's come too quickly. We need to catch up to the digital age. And this is why I've created my theory of digital supervision, because we need to do something to save this generation. They're being exposed to far more than any generation in the history of the world.
Well, Catherine, let me ask you something as a concerned parent. How much are you monitoring what your kids are watching online?
We monitor our children very closely. YouTube is basically the only online interaction that they have, but they are aware of social media and how that's in our lives. The other day, my 5-year-old was taking a picture of my 3-year-old and said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to post this on social media." So it's
what? A 5-year-old's telling you
yes.
that? Wow.
So I mean, she's not on it, but she's aware of it. It is part of the conversation in our house. Social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they are aware of these platforms, even though they don't use them.
What age would you allow your kids to maybe open up and start up an Instagram account, Twitter account, Facebook account?
You know, Hal, I'd probably go with the guidelines that they have as a minimum. And I believe for Instagram, it's 13. And I think that I'd like to push that as much as I can, but would certainly stick with their guidelines and go from there, I guess. We'll see.
You know, I hear many parents simply say, I can't keep up. My kids know way more about technology than I do. There's not much I can do. Charlene, how do you respond to that?
Well, as a teacher of high school students, I can safely say that the kids don't know nearly as much as they let on they do. They love throwing around acronyms. They know how to text, sext, game, and do social media. But parents giving these devices to their children have to realize they have a responsibility and should know what they're doing. And I'd like to backtrack a little bit about YouTube. And it's very... that platform, predators love it. And I'll give you an example. There are platforms where in YouTube, kids might do a query about a Peppa Pig type of cartoon. And they would be on there, and there'll be a list of videos related to it. And then there might be one called Teddy Bear's Picnic. And when the child clicks on Teddy Bear's Picnic, it could be XXX porn. So that YouTube is not benign to this type of problem, which is why digital supervision is so important, because you don't want your child seeing XXX porn. And there are children 6, 7, 8 years old addicted to porn because of that type of situation. So I'm just cautioning people on YouTube. It's not the safest platform for children to be on, and I'd like the mother in your studio to know that.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up too, Charlene, because we had a story about Momo, this character which gets kids to harm themselves, stab themselves, attack their parents. And a lot of times what these predators are doing, they're taking children's videos, and then halfway through the video, they're putting in this bizarre bird-like human character and having kids harm themselves. So, I mean, we really have to be on our children all the times, but can we? I mean, do you have the time, Catherine? Do you make the time, I guess, right?
Yes, and I mean, to the point of YouTube, I have been aware of when videos in like the stream pop up that like, you know, as it continues playing that are inappropriate for children. And we, with our girls, it's stuff that we've watched that, and if they're on YouTube, I am certainly in the room, if not sitting right next to them, making sure that I know what's coming up. But yeah, it's scary that I can't always have full control.
I'm glad to hear that you are there, because too many children are off in a basement corner and doing whatever they can, and they get the addiction to porn, and then so many other things are a result of that.
So Charlene, what kind of a plan do we have to put together then for our kids? What are your thoughts?
Well, with digital supervision, you have the iPads, the cell phones. The biggest problem now are the cell phones. We are partnered with a company called Atom Networks and Nerds on Site, and they have a filter with artificial intelligence on it. It's basically for the computer and the laptop. But when a child gets into YouTube and other devices, then the parents need to realize that a filter is not going to cover everything. And that's why we say that digital supervision and these devices are interdependent, so that digital supervision will take over as soon as the filter can no longer do the monitoring, which is why too many parents are becoming too dependent on a filter. They do not do everything. The one thing that I mentioned to parents is that put a keylogger on your cell phone. You own it. If your child is taking self-exploitive pictures, which means nudes, then they are creating, if they're under the age of 18, they are producing child pornography. And
let me ask you something then. Charlene, let me ask you something. Sorry to interrupt there. How often do you hear about, let's say, parents who hear that their children have befriended other kids, they think they're their age, when in fact they turn out to be predators?
That's done so often. And it's not just children. It's parents as well. They have people on their social media that they think they know. And let's face it, it could even be a relative. But you may have an unknown on your social media, or your security is wide open, and you're putting pictures up of your children. These pictures can then be taken and morphed into child pornography positions, which has happened already in the world. And it's digital supervision is to the children, the youth, and the parents, because parents are not benign to doing things that are unsafe for their children.
Now, Charlene, you've actually suggested in the past that parents keep the modem or the router in the bedroom. And why do you say that?
Yes, for two reasons. If the router is in the bedroom, you can turn it off at night. And when you have a filter or a modem, you can program it to turn off at a certain time. If people are not computer savvy, which is why I've written digital supervision, if they take it into their bedroom, they can turn it off, and their kids can't tiptoe around and turn it back on and do what they want. You make sure there are no unsecure routers in your neighborhood, because your children will go on the unsecure routers. The other reason is because you're telling your children you are in charge. Right now, children are in charge of the internet in their homes. The minute you put a gateway to the internet in your home, your responsibility as a parent increases exponentially, because whatever your children are doing, you're responsible for. Just because they're in front of a screen does not take away the responsibility of a minor.
Catherine, let me ask you then, have you put the router in your bedroom? And how often do you change the passwords on the kids?
We haven't. That's the first time I've ever heard that, and I think it's brilliant advice for parents. Our children can't log on to our devices. They don't have the passwords. And so far it's not an issue, but definitely something we'll keep in mind as they get older and have more access to the devices in our house, for sure.
Charlene, how about investing in some new software to block those pornography sites? More than just the filters that were given.
These kids, when they get older, when they're younger, it's good. When they get older, they can get around any block. I know as a network administrator in a high school, I would go in, and this was a professional corporate proxy server, and I would block sites. This is better than anything you could get at home. And I would go into another classroom, and there they'd be on it anyway, laughing and saying, "Oh, we got around the block." Now, the new filter that is being that has been developed by Atom Networks has artificial intelligence attached to it. The filter is a piece of technology or device that you can put on your computer, and then it will be a detangler, and you will not be able to go on certain sites. They have a bright web, they call it. And once that bright web is there, then your children will not be able to go to certain sites.
Catherine, what are you teaching your children when it comes to online safety? Education is key, and you've got a 5 and a 3-year-old. What are you saying to them?
Do you know, to be honest, we haven't done much because they don't have access. And so it hasn't been part of our conversation when it comes to social media, but I would love tips that we should start introducing now for our 5-year-old, because I mean, it'll be, before I know it, she'll be asking for access, and I'd love all the advice we can get.
Yeah, let's hear it, Charlene. Let's hear the tips and advice you have for us.
Well, I have to say it's perfect timing. When you said they were 5 and 3, I thought, oh, this is perfect. First of all, you're doing the right thing by never letting them be alone on these devices, especially at those young ages, because once there is an exposure to pornography, their innocence is gone. That's it. And there is an epidemic of children anxious and depressed because they've seen this sort of thing, but they don't know what to do about it. They don't know what to say to their parents because they know it's wrong. You need fully open communication with your children to talk to them about good pictures, bad pictures. And I tell people, please don't be afraid to use the words pornography or child pornography, because you're teaching your children terms that they're hearing on the TV anyway. If the news is on and your children are there, they're going to hear there's been a child pornography arrest. And you need to explain to your children, that's when people take bad pictures of you. And that would be without clothes on your private parts. And your private parts can be defined as whatever is covered with a bathing suit. So that these definitions have to be very clear to your children so that they can start realizing that someone taking a camera when maybe you're changing isn't a good thing. And the communication is huge. Looking at the browser, the internet browser, is huge. Talking to your children openly about what can happen when they're on devices. For example, I was talking to a young man one time about a person he was playing with on the internet. Oh, what's their name? Are they older? You don't villainize a child for being a victim, because you're villainizing them twice then.
So Charlene, should we set firm limits on how much time our kids spend on their digital devices, especially cell phones and social media? Those firm limits?
Yeah, I would absolutely. As I said, depression and anxiety is huge right now, and it's all about what am I going to miss if I'm not on the device. Kids that are so addicted that they can't do anything. There was one young man in Europe, in England, that was so addicted to doing selfies that he was almost suicidal because he wanted the perfect selfie. He was so addicted to it that he couldn't leave the house, he couldn't go to school, he couldn't work. These are things that in digital supervision, people have to be aware and watching constantly what's going on. This generation is going to be lost if we don't catch on to this, because this is a new concept. This is a new type of addiction. It's even written up in mental health circles that addiction to digital devices and selfies is now a mental health issue.
You know, it's interesting. We have a few politicians who have a problem with taking too many selfies as well, but we won't go there. Charlene Doak-Gebauer, founder of Internet Sense First, and Catherine Furukawa. Ladies, thanks so much for joining me today on Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
New technology can be so much fun, but it also has the potential to cause problems in our relationships. Maybe we're more attached to our phone than we are to our spouse. Dr. Greg Jans is a psychologist and best-selling author. A couple of his books do shed a little bit of light on the subject. Hooked, The Pitfalls of Media Technology and Social Networking, and Don't Call It Love. Welcome back to BCN, Doctor.
It is so good to talk about these topics. Wow.
Yeah, now listen, when you're on a date with your spouse, with your wife, or your boyfriend or girlfriend, how good of an idea is it to really answer a lot of texts and emails that happen to come in during that date?
Well, I know we've all been at the restaurant and we've seen people do this, and you go, "Wow, are you kidding? Are they even talking to each other?" What's really funny is if they're just texting back and forth to each other. I'm going to say, if you want to sit there and text to your spouse, that's one thing. Send some cute emojis, but don't pull it out. Give your spouse your full attention. Have this eye contact, be engaged. So the best thing to do is put that device away. It can be so distracting, and ignore it when you feel it going off. Give your spouse that attention that says you are special.
You are important, absolutely. But texts and emails can also be a useful tool at times. Is it helpful to maybe send love notes to your significant other via text or email? A just because text?
Okay, right before we came on, I got a text from my wife. Her name is LaFawn, and so we communicate during the day via text, and sometimes I get a little heart. That's fun. And I hope that we can use it to say things that are positive and encouraging. Do not use technology to bring up negative matters and to bring up problems. That's not the arena to discuss a problem. Not in a text. You know you're in trouble if you get a really long text. You go, oh, that's not the place to do it. Use it for encouragement. Use it as a way to connect in a positive way.
And you know, I'm glad you brought that up too. Sometimes when you send a text, the message may be a little misunderstood because there's no emotion that goes along with that text.
Especially if there's a potential conflict or there's something you're unhappy with, boy, we can really start to read into it. And so not only do we have whatever the conflict could be, we've communicated via a text or email, and that's not the right emotional context. So we can actually complicate an issue. So save those things that really are important or could be a potential conflict. Save those for in-person conversation.
Do we sometimes annoy our spouses a little bit too much by sending too many texts, perhaps, throughout the day? It's like, honey, listen, I'm trying to work here, please. I love you, but enough.
Yeah, I think we can. And it's kind of like, oh, I haven't heard from you. Are you okay? And so we need to be careful about the frequency and understand that we need to go about our days, but we do have a sense that's important or a need to be connected. So use it as a point of connection. But you know what? If you're on screen time while you were at work and it's not work related and it's 2, 3, 4 hours, that's not even fair to an employer. So let's really take a look and go, am I being integritous in the workplace? And is all this really necessary? So be careful with that.
So Dr. Greg, how do you know when you've actually become addicted to your phone or social media? Where do we draw the line?
Okay, so we work with folks who come in from all over for help for addiction. And we're seeing what I call a digital addiction. And here's the thing, can you go without your device for one day? And if you do, now here's the interesting. We do a little detox. When my boys were younger, we were really faithful to do what we call a digital detox one day a week. We chose Sundays where we didn't have our devices out. And it's interesting what can happen. People, their heart rate goes up, they get sweaty palms, and they get anxious. And it's like withdrawal symptoms. Okay, now I see that in people who come to us for help for depression, anxiety. If we need to put away their device because it can be really, really distracting, and just set that aside. And actually, what we do is we have a safe. We lock everything up, and we ask for the first week that we don't have a digital device or any screens. And one of the things is people will show addiction withdrawal symptoms.
What about posting pictures and information about your romance or relationships online? Now, a lot of people do it. You know, they want to get reactions, they want to get likes, but should there be some sort of guidelines set in place? Sometimes we may offer up a little too much information.
Yeah, you need to remember whatever you put out there, it really is permanent. I know that in working with an individual who's a detective who specializes in this area, he reminds me, he says, look, kids think Snapchat goes away. It doesn't. I can stick a device on that phone and I'll get everything off of it. Now, things that we put out there, just think in terms of permanent. Uh, and how many times have people, maybe they've been drinking or they're doing something and they're posting and then later they regret it. So take a pause, be careful, and remember what you're putting out there remains.
Have you ever sent a text or an email to the wrong person by accident? Like, hey, baby, thinking of you, love you. It's like, who is this? Oh, kind of the reaction you get, right?
I think we've all made that mistake. I had a professor that sent me a text this morning, and it was complaining about some things related to our snow and icy streets here. And I didn't know why he was sending it to me. And later he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Greg. I sent that to the wrong person. I'm so embarrassed." We've all made those mistakes. So um, let's just acknowledge it and smile and go on. You want to be careful though about sending inappropriate pictures. Some people call them romantic, but there's a line that gets crossed where it really is inappropriate, and we could say that it's sex texting. And I got to say that I've seen too many people regret, be injured, be misused, and I wouldn't even go close to that.
You know, it's interesting. That actually happened here in Canada last year. Some politicians got into trouble by politicians who were married by sending some of these inappropriate images. And it turns out it was actually somebody in Nigeria, a couple of guys that were posing as a young female here in Canada to try and extort money. So, you know, you really have to be careful, don't you?
You do. So I think you can send, to your spouse, obviously, wonderful words, romance, but there's a line to remember. The digital world is not the place to do all of that.
Now, apparently, stats show that social media sites can be marriage destroyers. People end up reconnecting maybe with old flames from many years ago. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I've seen that. I've seen it happen numerous times. Here's what we need to remember. A lot of times, a person reconnects maybe initially by accident, maybe through some Facebook or social media. And what happens is we remember that person as they were at 17 or 18 years old. And we have an image of them and a way of placing them in our mind, which is really how they were in the past. How often are we surprised? I can't even believe that's the same person. So remember, our past memories and how a person is today could be really different. So be careful. I'm all for having friends, but we need to know, if you're in a vulnerable place, that's not the time to reach out to a friend you've not talked to in 10 or 20 years.
Now, another problem we can run into with technology is the risk of running into pornography. You know, you may not even be looking for it, but sometimes it can pop up in various emails, social media sites. Any advice on how you can really protect yourself from this?
There are ways to protect ourselves, and we need to remember what we do in secret matters. And that's something that I've always reminded myself. What we do in secret matters because it's really not a secret. And so there is an accidental at times where you go, "Oh, I didn't ask for that." And I think we've got to be careful. We can either dwell or we can move on quickly. And so, there's programs to help protect us. There's various ones from what's incoming. But I always use the philosophy, am I going to be engaged in social media, or has something happened that I would be embarrassed that my wife would see me looking at? So that also includes what kind of stories you're going to be reading. What are you engaging with? It doesn't have to be just inappropriate pictures. And I know you can be reading the news on the web, and suddenly a an advertisement comes on, you go, whoa, what is that? I get it.
You know, I guess what we can do too is with our computers and our phones, we can always add filters too. You know, security
That's right.
filters too, right? You can do that
Yep.
as well to protect yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, some experts claim that men and women are essentially the same, but I don't know about that. I mean, I think our brains are wired a little bit differently. And if that's
Yes.
the case, what do men need to keep in mind when picking a place to take their wives on a date?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was just talking with Michael Gurian, who's an expert in this area of gender differences, and we did a book together. We were talking this morning, and we were talking about this very thing because people don't like to hear that there's gender differences, and there are. You just got to look at the science. The science is really, really good. Again, people don't like us to say that, but the science is really, really good on this. That said, if you want to please, let's say you want to please your wife, think about those things that are important to her, details that may not be important to you. We just had this recently. We went to an event. It was a social event. We sat around tables, and my wife said, "You know, they could have made this a lot nicer if they would have put just some flowers on the tables. It would have felt more welcoming." You go, "Okay, that's what was important to that female brain. She noticed something that I didn't even notice."
And you probably thought to
So,
yourself, maybe if they had the football game on behind you, honey, that would be even better,
so
right?
yeah. So remember, we're going to see different things. And especially if you want to do maybe a special date night or date nights, think about what could be important from, if you're the guy, from her vantage point. How's her eyes? How's she going to experience this setting?
Now, some couples have stopped going out on dates altogether. The fire is out. Any advice on how to rekindle that flame?
It's easy to slide into that, and I've fallen into that, and where I go, okay, I've got to purposely engage. And you could be tired. You go, oh man, it's Friday. I just like to stay home. But I have noticed that when I put out the effort and then show some interest that I'm really engaged, and I'm going to spend more time asking questions versus telling about my whole week and everything I've done. So flip it around and spend some time together. If you haven't done anything for a while, a good place to start is, well, when the weather's warmer, is go for a walk. Do something where you're engaged in some physical activity together. Walking's good as just an entry point to start communicating again.
I know there can be a stigma attached to going for marriage counseling, but is this not the right thing and the courageous thing to do, especially if your relationship is struggling?
Marriage counseling can be great. I'm a counselor, and I've gone to marriage counseling, and I have gone. I have two sons. We've done some family sessions. It's all about how can I personally improve. It's not about going into a session and saying how much the other person is screwing up, but really it's how can I improve. Two words that made a big difference that I really have to continue to embrace is mercy and grace. When I feel like I have to be right, I'm going to give grace. And so I've learned, even as a counselor, I've had the experience of going in to counseling, to marriage counseling, and I got to tell you, um, it can reap great rewards. You'll be glad you did.
How important is it for a husband and wife, especially when they have small children, to really show, let's say even the daughter, the husband, that this is the type of man I want you to marry? The type of man who will still romance your mother, take her out on dates, listen, hold hands and walk, maybe show a little bit of affection in public. How important is that for your young son or daughter to see that?
I think what we want to do is really model, and we're really mentoring for them. They're learning through us, even if you don't think they are. I know I was having a discussion about my youngest son. I go, okay, I'm seeing how he's treating girls and teasing them too much, and I'm going, okay, I really want him to be a gentleman. And then recently, I got some feedback from teachers at school, from a teacher at school, about how well he was doing in his social interactions with others, and I was relieved. So remember, sometimes our kids will behave differently when we're around than they will socially in other groups. So they're going to learn from us. And even if you don't feel like it, that mentoring or that modeling, it's important not only for you and for your spouse, but others are watching.
How important is it to have God in a marriage as well? Let's talk a bit about that.
You know, I know that that issue of faith over and over and over, people tell me, you know what, it really ultimately came to my faith and submitting to God, and God is who and how our marriage got redeemed. So I have to tell you, I see that over and over. People tell me that. They'll say, you know, I learned a lot of good skills, how to communicate, how to be a better spouse. But you know what? My relationship with my Creator, with God, changed in such a way that that's really what's kept me focused. So it's important, Hal.
Yeah, God is love. Dr. Greg Jans, psychologist and best-selling author, thanks so much for joining me today from Seattle, Washington.
Always good to be with you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.